Software supply chain attacks are continuing to expose vulnerabilities in organizations around the world. The time has come to focus your efforts on security for your software packages. Cloudsmith is the only cloud-native software package management solution for your enterprise. With Cloudsmith Continuous Packaging, you can securely deliver software across the globe and mitigate potential threats from entering your supply chain. With over 23 plus formats supported, Cloudsmith is the solution that engineers choose to safely deliver all of their assets. Reduce unneeded downtime and deliver with confidence. Start securing your software supply chain today by visiting securityweekly.com/cloudsmith. Contrast Security enables organizations to secure their applications from development to production. By embedding security sensors within software, Contrast automatically and continuously detects vulnerabilities in both custom and open source code while developers write code, providing them with context-specific how-to-fix guidance for easy and fast remediation. At the same time, by identifying only true vulnerabilities that pose risk and eliminating those that do not, Contrast empowers developers and security teams to prioritize and focus on only those vulnerabilities that matter. Learn how Contrast can help you secure your applications from development through production at securityweekly.com/contrast. Looking to improve your web application security? Probly is reinventing web application security. Probly focuses on the vulnerabilities that matter, eliminates false positives with evidence-based scanning, and provides a simple point-and-shoot solution that is easy to use. Probly's thorough coverage ensures accurate identification of vulnerabilities in any modern web application or API. Improve your web application security processes by visiting securityweekly.com/probly and start your free trial today.
Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. I'm your host, Mike Shima, joined by John Kinsella. InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's event. Hear from Robert Herjavec, plus heads of security at the NFL, TikTok, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Plus, Security Weekly listeners save 20% on digital pass registration. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW2021 to register now. Then you can also join us October 21st to learn why zero-knowledge encryption matters. Plus, if you missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Oh, news of the week. And John, I know you've got an article yourself, and there's some others to get through, but there's one in particular that I'm excited about because I believe it was Shakespeare who wrote 2E or .2E. That is regression. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to encode the dots and slashes of outrageous input or normalize against a sea of trouble. And with that, my iambic pentameter is done for the day. And yes, Apache has a directory traversal in it, and that was pretty exciting. But I stole all the thunder from that one. So anything, help us with this path traversal. What stood out to it about it to you?
Nah, you're good. I'm just pulling up. I was looking at the code on my laptop last week. And what's interesting about this one is I don't have them on my main machine, unfortunately. Because when this came out, we all know you love this type of vulnerability. So I had to go dig in, and because I know we'd be talking about it on air. And so I started looking at the actual pull request and for the patch. And it's not nearly as clear as you'd expect it would be. Mm-hmm. Right, it's a pretty nitty gritty, and partially because this is C, right? Yeah, it must be. It's HTTPD. I had to think for a second because Apache is so much Java, but yeah. So it's not like just it's interesting to go back and look at the patch. Maybe I'll throw it into Discord, see if I can copy between my machines here. But it's just complex enough that it's not just a simple cleaning up or anything. It's there's a decent bit of logic in there that had to make sure to get this right. And I'm not sure, honestly, if this is the first patch or the second. So I might have to double check that. But yeah, this was a tricky one. And this is a package which has been around for ages. And sort of the backstory on this for folks who aren't fully up to date. This was the result of I'll put air quotes improvement that they came in. I don't know if you know the timing, Mike. It was sometime in the last year, and then they realized that that wasn't quite as tight as we thought it was. The new code, so they had to go back and do this. My understanding is this is being scanned for out in the real world. So patch now, patch often.
Patch now, patch often. Yeah, and it does hit some of the common themes that they had to release a patch for the patch because the original fix wasn't quite right. What are some good mitigating circumstances around this is that, yes, it is a pretty gnarly vulnerability, but everyone wasn't necessarily exposed to this by default. It's more if you're running these cPanel type of applications that are sort of for managing, web-based management of an infrastructure environment. So still pretty bad, but not a sky is falling type of bad. But I'm glad you were looking into the source code. That's because that's one of those things that I often recommend or try to look at myself too, is just to see what does this patch look like in trying to learn from what people are doing to fix things. And that learning is in the sense of, was this just as simple as a human mistake where it was the sense of a logic comparison was off, so there's a single bit flip or something like that. But this did have some subtle changes to it. And one of the things that stood out to me is kind of a nice aspect is they also deprecated a flag as part of this fix. It's sort of that they don't need it anymore. And the reason I like that is that for as much as there is, benefit and need to write more code, add more code, expand systems, applications like Apache HTTPD, there's also a great security benefit to deleting code or deprecating code as well. And so anytime you can delete code, fingers crossed, are reducing your attack surface and making a security improvement just in that manner as well, so that these logic flows can be perhaps more, or hopefully more understandable for humans that are reading them, or even potentially less complex for the automated tools trying to walk through the AST and understand what is the path from this tainted input down to a sink where this might be an exploitable vuln. So some interesting, I think at least, some interesting kind of tidbits there about the, this is a path traversal, fun thing, but some good points to talk about, I hope.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's you make me think the way you describe that. There's something when, as a developer, when I get to actually delete some of my code because it's no longer being used, either because I found a more elegant way, or if a feature's not needed, or usually one of the reasons why we delete code, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but also at the same time, there's often a sense of not satisfaction, but I guess I'll use that phrase for now. But like you've actually, as a developer, frequently we like that. We want to make things cleaner and more elegant, and hopefully not to have all these sort of nitty gritty if tests to make sure we're secure.
Right.
So it's a nice thing if we can deprecate something and initially sort of let's just put a feature flag test on it or something like that to sort of make it there but not being used for now, and then when you actually get to finally remove it. So it's a wonderful thing to do when we can. So I agree with what you're saying is what I'm trying to say.
That does set up, I think, a good segue. We have a bunch of articles, but I did pull in an article about Microsoft disabling Excel 4.0 macros by default. And this one is the AppSec connection is not so much here are macros that have existed since 1992. So, this is we're talking, the first Matrix era, a movie time in the world here, before the first Matrix even, and Microsoft finally came about and disabled these macros by default because they've been a massive attack surface, and lots of attackers apparently in 2021 have been targeting it. But I wanted to pull this in less just because it's a Microsoft aspect, but kind of to continue what you were talking about there just now, John, is when you look at your code, when do you make those decisions about something should be a disable by default so that we can get that sense of secure by default? And here I'm kind of thinking of Kubernetes. Let's have some more just secured configurations by default so we can avoid these 50 pages of deploy secure by do this, 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 and this. So they're secure by default, but then there's a deprecation line, and then you can also just remove a feature. But clearly there's a tension, especially if a feature can stick around for 30 years, a tension between the business reasons or the business context, we need this, it must remain, versus that's terribly insecure, architectures have changed, our design patterns have changed, let's just get rid of it. So throwing this out maybe just more as a thought exercise, perhaps as well for our listeners, but a thought exercise for you, John, since I know that you and I have, some different sort of perspectives on refactor all the time versus, no, we actually have a business to run and, we need to make some money.
There was, I'm going to sidetrack on that for a second. A friend on LinkedIn last week from a different Slack, I'm on a CTO Slack. If I can find his name real quick, I'll throw out a great. Mark Batty wrote a post. I think he's quoting someone else talking about developing software development from a point of view of you don't want you're not trying to get to the pageant award-winning baby. You want an ugly baby, right? You need something that it's a baby. It's got the arms and legs and everything, and it's you're working on getting something that will get you shipping product and all those type of things. It falls apart a little bit, I know. I went a little bit further and said, you want to make, and I'm going to clean up my language for general consumption. But you want to make sure that you're still having that baby for the right reasons, not to make sure someone loves you and stays married to you. So, but yeah, that point being, agreeing with what you just said there. But going back to the this article, what caught my eye, the visual me, is if you look at when the attacks, I mean, this is, you said, it's been around for forever, but it's really the last few years that the attacks have really started picking up on it. They have like a graph of attack frequency, and I thought that was really interesting. That I guess probably as the malcreants out there sort of they stopped having other things they were interested in or that were easily vulnerable for them to use. They're like, okay, what's next? Hey, how about this thing that's been around for forever? Let's go back and try that again. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I'm not sure what percentage of people are actually still using this in some degree. Mm-hmm. So hopefully you didn't leave too many people behind when they did this. There's not too much teeth chattering. But yeah, I think it's a good idea that they put this one to bed.
Yeah, and I think with an optimistic hat on, in addition to my Doctor Who hat, I like to think too that an uptick in targeting this type of ancient software and less secure architecture, less secure design is a reflection that the modern software of the web browsers, the other business software, that those actually have been hardened to a point that clearly we still have 0 days, we still have vulnerabilities, but they're not so pervasive, and perhaps they're just patched that much more easily that it is forcing the attacker costs to look for these older tried and true methods, which for that matter, regardless of all of the software improvements, compiler improvements we can do, if we're still going to lose credentials, stolen credentials are one of the easiest ways to access a system, which is also why one of the reasons I'm mentioning FIDO keys every single episode so far in October. And I think it also gives us a segue into the Twitch security incident. So here was not a software problem in the sense of memory safety or a cross-site scripting or some type of injection attack, but apparently a misconfiguration. Now, unfortunately, I would love to know what the specific misconfiguration was, whether it was something cloud-based or a particular appliance. But whatever this configuration change was, allowed an attacker into the Twitch environment, and they extracted lots of data, lots of interesting things. And here we haven't talked about breaches in quite a while, and I wanted to make two sort of AppSec ties about this one. One is that there's business impact for breaches. When we talk about the OWASP top 10, we talk about threat modeling. I really want to harp on the idea that let's make sure we pull in the business context. It's a lot of what Tom was just describing too in the last segment. And here the business context is, gamer payouts for what are the top 100 or so streamers on Twitch. And that's sensitive information, especially for those streamers. Of course, it has implications for Twitch as well, but there's people involved in the consequences of poor security, and that's what I wanted to hit on. And then just the other aspect too, from since there was source code leaked here, I'm going to be very curious to see how many people are getting a copy of the source code, running their own SAS scanners against it, their own SEP reps and linters, and they're going to start populating the Twitch bug bounty with, oh, by the way, I just happen to have known that there is a vulnerability here in your code. Throw me some bug bounty bucks. So don't have anything to necessarily prove that that's going to happen, but just a bit of curiosity in the sense of there's code out there now.
Sorry, I was trying to Google something really quickly. Do they have a bug? Yeah, they're on HackerOne. Let me think. Yeah, so this was so this is interesting. I think that the post we have here is sort of making it look not as bad as we all know it is. But what was interesting to me about this when it first came out, I really didn't look and watch this one closely. I'm like, okay, whatever. Beside the fact that we, both you and I, Mike, we need to work on becoming the top application security streamers on Twitch. The
Amen to that.
thing that people need to think about is it sort of comes back to supply chain in a way. Either from a SaaS point of view or even source code or any of these sort of things, that just because a company like Amazon has a well-respected, well-known, I will say, security stance, that doesn't mean that all their children companies or all their projects have that same level of quality. There's other orgs out there, I'm not going to mention names, I know they've got very well-respected, very top-end, extremely well-secured applications. But that same org has, the other parts which have that aren't making as much money. This isn't someone we usually talk about on the podcast, so someone completely else. But there's other packages which they have, which haven't been updated for a few years, or only have like 2 developers working on them. And man, that thing, when you point the scanner at it, is Swiss cheese. So this is sort of that same type of thing. It's like, okay, it's interesting. The average person who's using Twitch, this is a good one actually. The average person who's a Twitch user, how much are they thinking about security of the application when they signed up for Twitch, or when they're using it day in, day out? Even those guys that are at the top payers, whatever they're being paid, were they thinking, did they ever consider that there's a chance that their earnings might get leaked out? And this is sort of the interesting aspect of really a consumer product, right? A lot of what we do, we focus around enterprise security to a pretty good degree, because that's where, unfortunately, usually where the money is. I've been having a lot of interesting conversations with the VCs about that recently, but that's sort of part of it, right? We usually don't think too much about security of consumer or SMB or SME. So here's a pretty good example of what happens when you don't focus on that for that sort of corner of the market. And the counter for those who are playing along at home that haven't had these fun discussions with the VCs usually look at startups that are enterprise security space, because enterprises are known to pay for security because of, they're making money off it. They want to be able to sell to other enterprises, all these type of things. If you're trying to make a security product that's going to be sold to a consumer company, say like say you're doing security for fashion designers that are going to sell clothing online, you're going to have a much harder time doing a raise on that, because the VCs think that the clothing sites aren't going to be as interested in paying money for that. And that's sort of part of the, this space we're in, just enterprise, security and weekly. I mean, it's hard for me even not say enterprise security like I just did. But that's sort of the interesting takes of this. Everyone needs application security. We all need to think about this, from the IoT stuff we talk about up to things like this. So how do we help push that out?
Well, John, you can help push this out by us. Roll up a D&D character, and since we're going to start doing a hybrid Dungeons & Dragons application security weekly Twitch streaming, and that will get us out into that top 100 for sure. But I think you are making good points, and I think those points that you're making we can tie into the SaaS bomb that Tom did mention, and you very quickly and helpfully pulled in an article on that. And real quick, my first impression of that, the idea of a SaaS bomb is, I just want to know, does the SaaS offer SSO, and are we using it as an organization, as a consumer of this SaaS? Now, there are obviously some other very important aspects about how is code being built, what is being packaged, what service is being delivered, but just that SSO part, if we could solve that for an organization to say, how many third-party, how many SaaS apps are we using? How many of them are onboarded to SSO? The two simple questions, often hard to answer, especially as you get into, I was going to say especially as you get into larger, more complex organizations, but I'm going to suspect that even small organizations, and here I'm thinking of, 20 to 30 person shops, possibly rely quite a bit on SaaS because that's a great way to amplify and improve your productivity in a lot of different areas. So the SSO is, I have to get beyond just the SSO aspect. So help pull me into some other interesting parts of this SaaS bomb, John.
That's one of the more important aspects of this from a, basic sort of low-level, low-hanging fruit we should be able to knock off. This isn't quite as strong as I was hoping for. So I think what got me excited to go and track this down when we were talking about in the last episode is, I think 2 weeks ago, I was saying, hey, we need to have this for the SaaS providers, for them to tell us. So that's why I was really excited and hoping this would be at first. I think this is more geared towards, I'm a company, I consume a bunch of SaaS products. I need that to be a part of my SBOM, which I'm able to share wherever I'm going to share it, either internally for security practices or if I'm going to have this exposed to one of my partners, either I'm working with in one way or another. And what's interesting, there was a sentence in here, I'm not going to find it right now, but what really sort of struck me was they were saying part of the reason they came up with this, SaaS bomb, is that the bombs which we have right now, which we've been talking about, again, last episode and out and about, but the CyberDX, as well as, I can't remember the other one right now, but, the 2 or 3 different standards we have for this, those are really focused on software and their dependencies, but the scope of those frameworks hasn't been, I'll say loose enough. It hasn't been flexible enough to be able to bring in, some sort of a service that you're using for something not so much that you're linking in or compiling it, but something that you are making an API call out to or something like that. So I think this is going to help cover that. But still, I'd love to see, let's go a step further and have some of these cloud providers actually sort of somehow expose what they're doing when they're using something which has been written internal. I'm not sure how much more work that's going to take, but that's really the direction I'm hoping to see over the next 18, 24 months.
Definitely a lot of work, I'm going to suspect. And I'm going to use that as a chance to pull in another article that, I read through, I looked at the open source project that it is referring to, but I haven't had a good chance yet to understand it fully. So without further ado, let me introduce this other article about microservices adoption and the software supply chain. So once again, perhaps not the most exciting title, but it's talking about supply chain issues, the ones that we were talking about with Tom, some of the difficult aspects that you were pointing out just now, John, as well, was with SaaS and what should they what steps do they need to take, or how long will it take to go through all those steps? So this one kind of caught my eye because it's an open source project, but sponsored by a new startup that's basically about the idea of building an AST, and then rather than throwing some static analysis against that AST to find known vulnerabilities, things like that, basically say, let's manipulate it and do some refactoring at scale. So there's definitely, this isn't necessarily a new concept, but it's pretty cool to see the concepts start to be approached at scale, to use our second cliche of the episode. But in the sense that if you do have a huge mono repos, or you have a huge code base and you have to update a whole bunch of packages, updating those packages can be pretty tedious from a manual perspective. Same thing goes if you are using Terraform or particular Kubernetes configurations, and you want to enable something that is secure by default, rather than manually have to go to flick on all of these switches to say, yep, now we're enforcing this. If you could do this automatically with a tool like this Open Rewrite, there's potentially an appeal to there. And the reason I threw that little caveat, time you are making code changes, some bad things can happen if you don't have good test suites, or you don't have good regression testing, or good, just even unit testing for that matter. So I see some promise here, and I would just be curious if anyone out there has actually done any real large amounts of automated code refactoring, other than the large Googles out there that I know have done this in a few cases. So Thought it was interesting. Not sure if it has a similar appeal to you, or if it's sort of like, let's just wait and see, and what might be, what might the future hold for this type of approach.
Yeah, it's definitely appealing to me. And very full disclosure, I actually have a small position in the parent company Modern from AngelList Investment, so it's nothing major. But as soon as I saw it, I'm like, yeah, these guys are doing something cool. I haven't got a chance to use Open Rewrite. I have watched it multiple times and sort of been looking at it, looking for an excuse almost. But they've been gaining steam over the last year. I think it's been open sourced about that. So it might be sort of fun to try and grab those guys at some point and bring them on here. They're based in San Francisco, so that could be sort of fun to talk a little bit deeper about what they're up to.
Yeah, definitely would be fun to talk more. And wonderful that you've got that connection. AppSec, InfoSec is a small world after all. Speaking of small worlds, I had some kind of small topic articles here. One was just about NSA warns of Alpaca attack and the use of wildcard certs. And that one was just, I pulled that in because we did mention Alpaca earlier this year, I think back in one of our June 2021 episodes. Kind of interesting just to say vulnerabilities in TLS, configurations, mismatches that TLS is in other places besides HTTPD, besides web servers. That's kind of the gist of just where I'm going with there. But here I wanted to pull in a little bit of the aspect of the wildcard cert, and my mind went into sort of that idea of a lesson learned in the sense of, for the longest time, InfoSec community was like, use HTTPS, use HTTPS. We're going to shame you into using HTTPS. And then finally somebody like Let's Encrypt came along and said, well, rather than just telling people what they should be doing and pointing out the problem over and over again, why don't we try solving it? And Let's Encrypt solved it by making it possible to obtain certs for free. So addressing the one budget aspect, as well as introducing like the ACME protocol, so that the ongoing maintenance of certificates could be managed, because that's also one of the harder parts. And here, the wildcard certificates are often more expensive certificates, but they were also kind of addressing a ease of use, if you will, for organizations that have tons of domains, because maybe they have domains that can be arbitrarily created for user-generated content, that sort of thing. And now we get in that sudden tension of incentives between, let's have a wildcard cert because we have all these complex user-generated domain names, but that wildcard cert, if it's compromised, if it's leaked, if it's lost, could be pretty consequential. And it is nice to see, an encouragement to move away from there. So that was sort of my attempt to pull in, a broader thought around this type of article. So I'm not sure if there's anything more there for you, John, or if we could go into our last one and think about cybersecurity programs.
I think I would actually go as far as to say, I think, 12 to 18 months, I guess that's where my brain is today. But within that 12 to 18 month window, let's just get rid of wildcard certs. I think ACME's been around for a few years now. Most of us know Let's Encrypt had some issues last week, and they sort of caused a lot of pain and teeth gnashing for people. But that's we can talk about that. Well, let's talk about it. So I don't think we covered it. Let's Encrypt had a root certificate change, if I remember right. They gave a pretty good amount of heads up. As with most things TLS, people weren't watching. So when the root certificate actually flipped, people were caught, let's say, red-handed, and their domains went offline for a little bit. So they, ran around hair and fire and got that fixed. And that's the problem with something like Let's Encrypt. You have to know it really well. You have to watch it very well. Otherwise, you will get bitten. And I've been bitten in the past. But all that said, once you know all these things, and maybe we need a better way, maybe they need to come up with now that they've got Let's Encrypt done itself, they need a better way to monitor and notify and let people know what's going on with them. Those certs with the system. But you have the ability to generate a TLS cert that easily. Why would you need a wildcard?
Yes.
So yes. If we don't need it, let's goodbye. And one last closing point on that. Every time I see an Alpaca attack, I wish there was a fuzzing angle in here, because you could say fuzzy Alpaca or something, but I'm reaching.
Keep on reaching. We need to see some more wonderfully named vulnerabilities with warm and cuddly mascots for sure. And you set up a good segue, I think, because the idea that we shouldn't need wildcards anymore, because as you described, the processes to obtain certs for SNIs and whatnot is that it's so much easier and of course cheaper, especially when cheaper can be zero in terms of the cost of purchasing, not necessarily the cost of maintenance, but again, Acme protocol, let's encrypt as your friend. And this ties into another article from Phil Venables. So this is the second time we've grabbed an article of his, and this definitely goes into the think piece article that has none of the negative connotations of think pieces and more of, oh, this is good things to think about. And what stood out to me were numbers 5 and 7. So these are he has a list of good properties of a cybersecurity program. Number 5 was a strategic architecture, and number 7 was preventative maintenance. So strategic architecture is very much the idea of the modern movement towards zero trust. There's even, he doesn't use the word, zero prod or zero trust in prod. I can't remember what the fancy term is for that. But the idea of shifting left, moving attestation and authentication onto peer-to-peer discussions conversations between devices as opposed to network-based security. And then number 7, that preventative maintenance, that's the idea of, get rid of your tech debt. Let's review. Maybe we should have deprecated those XML 4.0 macros quite a long time ago. Or let's revisit, why do we have these wildcard certs? Is there something that has changed in our ecosystem that actually gives us better processes, better architecture, better design pattern, that we can actually replace this altogether with something that is new and improved? And hopefully my excitement, my enthusiasm for this is coming across, because I think that this is a really good thing to point to, in the sense of, we're not deploying a tool to look for vulnerabilities. We're actually doing some work to get rid of the potential for vulnerabilities in the first place. So that's why I got excited about this article. Tell us more about this, John. When you look at this, what stands out for you?
I think I'll pick out my 2 favorite, which I think would be number 1 and number 6. So accountable executive. And this sounds, really, I don't want to say cliche, but it sounds like we know about that. But I think a lot of the folks out there that are doing AppSec, or that are trying to do AppSec, you'll have a CTO or some sort of a C-level type person. They're like, do we really need to be spending this much time on this, or can we just get that code out? And that will, I believe the technical phrase is, bite you in the ass. So you have to have the exec team, that exec board, the exec team and the board, particularly the board, need to understand, we're doing this for a reason. We're not over engineering. We're not being perfectionists. We're not, doing all those things which engineers get blamed for. We care, and we actually want to, within reason, put a little bit of effort into making sure that we don't end up like Twitch. And I'm just using them example. I'm not poking fun at them purposely. And then number 6 is sort of the second part of that, transparency. And it's not just, to me, I don't think it's so much transparency itself. I think what you get if you have a culture of transparency is you have a little more mature thinking. You have a little less, let's shove things underneath the carpet. It's, hey, we need to talk about this. So if we're going to talk about this, what do we need to do to actually prepare and actually have not just a good story, but let's get our stuff right. And so I think that's, multiple of these are good points, right? Let's go over 1 or 2 others just for the giggles. The architecture, I think you mentioned, is super useful. Independent challenge is sort of interesting. I mean, I think what's interesting also, when I started to look over these the first time sort of really quickly, is a lot of them sort of feel like something from either an ISO 27001 or from what's our US guy? We were just talking about it last hour. SOC 2. Yeah. So I think a lot of these type of things we see as we go into regulated markets, which more and more of us are becoming. But it's still a good thing to be talking about and thinking about.
Indeed. And I think those regulated markets are good forcing functions for just maturing the processes. And I wanted to emphasize that, because none of what we're saying has been implying or trying to imply that you've got your ISO certification or you've got your SOC 2 secure, but it should mean that you have the processes in place that leads to better security practices that can translate into more secure software, or also better responses when there is a breach or when there is a problem in your piece of software. And I'm kind of hoping to tie this into our SBOM discussion, that SBOM also has some of that aspect of that forcing function just to mature the processes, even if it's as simple as your shift left, we'll say, or securing the SDLC. And yes, as you said too, hopefully we'll continue to see more transparency in that. Following Twitch, topical this week, of course, for the breach, but we'll see more transparency about the reporting, about what came out of that, so others can also avoid similar mistakes or understand just what server misconfigurations can come to bite people and avoid them. So I think that exhausts my my thought on articles for the week. And any parting thoughts for our listeners, John?
Ooh, parting thoughts. Secure your stuff. I was looking at one more. We didn't get into the news here, but I think we got a few seconds, so I'll talk about it. Coinbase had 6,000 user accounts at least partially compromised due to how their 2FA was set up. And I'll add this into Discord here in a second. Do a little copy paste thing. But the point being, bringing this up, and we've seen this thing before, having. And we're actually just talking about multi-factor authentication tokens on there earlier in Discord. But having this type of stuff by itself isn't enough, right? It's how do you actually do it correctly? How do you make sure everything's set up right? And it seems like we've got some laws coming into place which will allow the spamming on SMS and the takeover of not your SMS key, the card in your phone. That'll be a little more difficult to do, account takeovers. But still, SMS's 2FA needs to go away, I think, personally. But if you're going to use it, be very careful on how you do. And I think probably my takeaway from the day, as I wrap back to that, would be research, right? You can't just pick something and use it, but actually think about what are the security ramifications of this. Is it secure by default? Do I need to be doing it a different way? Have we been seeing people get attacked through this? How could someone attack it? Can I, now that I've thought about that, how do I secure that? So that's my moment of Zen for today.
Excellent moment of Zen, and thank you to everyone in the Discord. Also pointing out, Google's rolling out or distributing FIDO keys to some of its highly at-risk users. And so, just to kind of emphasize what John was saying, the FIDO keys are a great counter to account takeovers, but they're introducing other considerations that you have to take in the sense of, how do you do account recovery once you do have a FIDO key? Because those little bits of hardware, easy to lose, easy to get messed up. And once you're locked out, you need to have a good, and at least equally secure mechanism of account recovery that doesn't fall into a much more insecure process that's then once again easily compromised that could lead to account takeover. So October is Halloween Horror Month. Go get your FIDO key, protect your accounts. That's the message. The other message is, thank you for joining us. Thank you, John, as well. And we're going to go make up our D&D characters and get ready for some Twitch streaming as well. Let's see when we can kick that off. We'll return next week in a spine-chilling sequel to Application Security Weekly.